It's really an honor for me to be here with you tonight. I wanted to gather a lecture that will kind of try to transmit the ethos and the values in which we design. And I hope that we can create a little conversation afterwards. I mean, I really like dialogues, and these lectures are normally often only monologues. In 2016, I received a call from Pater Kilian, a Cistercian monk from Heiligenkreuz Abbey in Austria. And since then, I have been working for a new monastery for them. This has become a lifetime project because I'm going to work the rest of my life for sure and probably beyond. But also it has become a life-changing project. Ultimately, I have understood that a monastery is the ultimate domestic space. So I did not put together a lecture to convince you to become a monk, but definitely I wanted to share kind of the two most important things that I've learned till now, although I know it's going to be an ever learning process with this order and with this project. But one of the very kind of deep roots of why a monastery exists is because they are totally conceived to hold bodies, physical bodies, to exist in this world, to be able to perform their spiritual life. And I think that there's no building I ever encountered, no other typology that I ever worked on or researched on that truly is dedicated to really surrendered to hold bodies to exist. What I mean with this is that this building really understands that a body needs to be held and needs to, because otherwise it needs to be protected from the environment, otherwise it not survive. But it is really a place that understands that we have two very important intrinsic necessities. One is to have our intimate self, to be able to nurture our body and to grow. And the second one is to have a community around, because our interconnectedness self would not allow us to live otherwise. So the monastery was exactly built because very soon these monks of the desert that were surrendered to a spiritual life, hermits, surrendered to a spiritual life, understood that it was impossible to live by themselves. Little by little, they understood that the other hermits were around because they needed them to survive. So a monastery in the 6th century was defined completely in its full by Saint Benedict. Although it was never described as a physical space, it was very described on how it should work and what a building on those characteristics should be and how it should be used. It's very well described, and you clearly understand how it really is thought to really hold bodies to exist. When we started working with these monks 8 years ago, the first thing we needed was to understand what is this legacy that we're building on, what are the characteristics of this order, and of course beyond all of them being absolutely interesting and really heavy on the things that promoted and that they changed and that they produced in the middle centuries. In the Middle Ages, then it was really understanding their legacies, their histories, and how to build a monastery for this order on the 21st century. We, of course, we're not going to challenge the way a monastery is designed. Beyond that, we really understood that as I said, it's not only kind of totally surrendered to understand what are the necessities of a body in order to grow and to thrive and to live the spiritual life. It's completely linked to the environment. So by the rhythm that the monks perform in this building and the way these activities or rituals, I would say much better, are distributed in the space, they correspond also to the hours of the day. So it really, the building works as the same as the time passes in the day, or the day goes by in the weeks and in the months and the years. It really allows the monks also to have this rhythm that sustains a physical life. We understood very clearly that in the housing typologies that we have today, we have completely disregarded almost every one of the most important human necessities in deep. Although we tend to think that we are kind of holding the most kind of needed things for a person in a house, like eating, washing, and sleeping or resting, we're disregarding really the most important and deep things that a person needs to live in this planet. I totally believe that architecture provides a primary form of care. It really holds bodies to be able to exist, because otherwise we cannot exist in this planet. Nevertheless, we have proven as humans that a cave or a shelter is not enough. We are much more complex beings. Therefore, just a protective structure is not what holds us. The same as not just a bathroom makes the process of cleaning our physical body. The same, a room does not hold our sleep. The same, a kitchen will not provide the nutrients we need to eat. And I will go in that direction further. But one of the important things is that the monastery understands that. And its primary way of sustaining all the body and human necessities is through the ritual that it's performed. So it's not through holding habits or functions, it's holding rituals. And in the way these rituals are performed is the way that those can be held better. But not only that, I mean, I'm not going to go in detail on the project, but this is kind of the first the axonometric that we did after many years of working. And sorry, I have to say that this project is done in collaboration with Dogma, a studio led by Pier Vittorio Aureli and Martino Tatara, based in Brussels, and Mayo, who's a studio based in Barcelona, Ana Puijaner, Guillermo Lopez, Maria Chaneco, and Alfredo Lerida. And us, we invited those two other offices. We believe that architecture is a collective act, but I will explain that later. And what I think is, I'm not going to describe in detail the project, because I think that these two findings, these two understandings that we have really kind of being able to extract from the process of designing this project, for us have been instrumental in the way we think on the built environment today. And the first one, as I already said, is the understanding of the deep possibilities that architecture can really hold bodies to exist in a much more complete way, let's say, than just for it to be holding functions. We need much more, and one of the only possibilities for it is to understand this dichotomy of a body that needs to have its individual space, its individual a possibility of really nurturing itself by the moments of intimacy, but the same way it is interconnected to a community. So how to deal with those two things, the monastery does in a really interesting way. A monk never is exposed to the big community after being in the intimate space, neither the other way around. Nevertheless, in our built environment, everywhere, and especially in housing, we come out from our most intimate space to be exposed to a very big collective, and then the possibility of a community really is almost zero. A community to being created is almost zero. And as I said, I think that the understanding of architecture in the monastery as a protective structure in a very extended sense is what a monastery is. The monks really understand that the most important kind of structure is ourselves, our bodies. That's what it holds, that spirit that it's able to live this life that they live and that they aim to live forever. It's that it needs to be protected with the first layer, which is the robe. So the robe is the first architecture, let's say, that holds a body. In this case, it's obviously an identitarian piece, but it's really is done in that way because it's their first important layer of protection. This body, it's held in its cell, in individual cells that are connected to a cloister, where is the first moment of encounter with their others, the other close others, which are their brothers. Then the cloister is connected and linked to the more collective spaces, which are the refectory, the chapter room, the library, the parloirs, and the sacristy, other spaces in the monastery, which a larger community is gathered. And then this is connected to the church that is the place where the community, or exterior community, can come in and can interact with the monks, or the monks can interact with them, and beyond that, the community at large. The monks go, because of the ritual, from their intimate self, their body, their bare body, towards the more exposed collective in stages through different times of the day. So they go first to they are in their cell, they go to the cloister, then they meet the others in encounter, because the rhythm of their day marks them also how to, in which space they should be, and then the church, and then the exterior community. This never happens in the built environment that we have today. We are really held in boxes that, more than are than really providing and becoming platforms for people to live, they are really places to produce everything. To start with, their commodities, that their aim is to produce market revenues, and more today. Secondly, I mean, the configuration, it's really set up as a production line. If you can think, obviously this comes this type of housing is the every type of housing that we are producing, thinking. It's in almost every code of every part of the world, and we all architects repeat in just repeat mode. It's really a space that it's really surrendered to produce productive human beings. That doesn't mean that they are holding lives to exist. In the contemporary society, I think we tend to have forgotten that to produce, we need first to exist. Today, to exist, we need to produce first. We cannot have a house or a roof on top of our heads, which is a primary necessity. If we don't work, we do not have food in our plates. If we don't work, we don't have education, we don't have health, we cannot grow in any regard if we or others produce for us first. The irony and the big friction comes when we understand that to produce, we need first to exist. So I believe that we need to really transgress the understanding of producing houses to make human beings productive or efficient to be in cities in order to think on how to sustain bodies to exist, care for them, and then we maybe produce. We have been working, and I have dedicated my entire career in this regard. As I said before, I think that architecture provides a primary form of care. I believe its power relies there. And I have always worked from that point of view. So I think I have a very big responsibility because without these structures, people really are unable to grow healthy, stable, and I'm not just saying this in a paternalistic way. I think that architecture provides the possibility of lives to be inspired, and I use the word inspiration in a much broader way. The inspiration for me means the possibilities of anything to provide spiritual, intellectual, physical, moral, etc., growth to any person. So for me, architecture has that capacity, and I've tried to work since I started on that. So the majority of my work kind of starts, and the core of it is from the space we kind of spend the majority of our reproductive life, which is the domestic environment, and then to every other regard, because I also believe that we live 365 days a year and 24 hours a day. So it's not only that we live in our houses, we live everywhere the whole day and the whole year and the whole time we live. So we've been working in several projects that ranges from many different types of houses, housing, and many different types of models and schemes. This was one we worked in Acuña. Actually, it comes from a design strategy for a national housing program in Mexico that provides with plans and instructions for anyone and subsidy for anyone that qualifies in this program to build their own houses. So we thought, and instead of giving a manual on how to build your house as a specific object, we wanted to give you tools to build your own house in your own way. At some point there was, well, not at some point, in 2017 there was a big tornado in a border city called Acuña, which is in border with Texas. The border city in Texas is Del Rio. And in this city, 22 houses were lost. So the Infonavit asked us to replace those houses with this model, which was not a model of a house, it was a design strategy, but the Infonavit applied it as a model, although it still had its possibilities for being more expansive. We understood that it provided a platform for some things. Of course, this was a very unfortunate situation, and the delicate ideas of the design that were kind of providing the tools to design your own space instead of providing a specific design did not prove completely true because of the emergency of the situation, but also our idea was to really think on how the city is produced and provided by how we live everywhere. So we extended the notion and the possibility to think not only on those houses, but also on the public space. If we think that the house of today is kind of the product of the Industrial Revolution, and that we really, the city is totally surrendered to the mode in which we exist, the city of production, and for me it is called like that, the city of production. For me, my task has been to understand what is then the city of care. How do we transform our built environment that we have today that is completely surrendered to produce capital in order to sustain bodies in this planet to exist? What are the capabilities and the possibilities with what already exists, but what is for the future to build? We participated in a competition for one of the projects that the city of Paris launched to fulfill the program of Paris 2030, and thinking on how to not only renovate but create new stock of built spaces, and how to think of those spaces that would respond today to a beneficial cycle of productivity for the city, meaning what can a building really give to a city, and what do the city can give to the building in not harming the environment, the ecosystem in full. And so we proposed, we were among a very big team, and we won this competition in Port de Montreal, where we are going to build 3 of those buildings. And the idea already for the city was to think, what is a building that can be used today, but also tomorrow, and also in 100 years that we don't know how people will inhabit, and that we hopefully they change little things so they can still inhabit, because we didn't. So one of the aspects is that this is a building that can be transformed very easily into very different ways of using it. So right now might just be used as spaces for sleeping or for working or for creating or something, but we are thinking how to very easily environmentally harmful could those spaces be transformed in a fast way in order to allow any activity to happen. So the first thing you have to think is that if you are building a space dedicated to housing, you will have these compartmentalized structures, and that every day more and more are less and less, have less and less space. Then they're very difficult to really reuse, no? What do you transform a bathroom in? What do you transform a small kitchen in? What do you transform a small room in it? No? So how can you think in a much broader sense, or the other way around? You do offices, but then they are so deep inside those buildings that you cannot use them for a house. You cannot transform that into housing. So how can you do a building that has the capacity of holding every single program at any given time? Was the competition we wanted with these buildings, and we are following with the project. It was halted a little bit after pandemic, Olympic Games, etc. Now it's going back. Many of these things that we are using almost as testaments for the projects that we do in more collective ways have come really trying to think on much more private ways. I mean, doing these more privileged commissions that really give us the freedom to think and experiment how we can think on topics, for example, as hierarchies in these families, no, and how to eliminate hierarchies in a space. In this house, it's that topic. I'm not going to stop, but also how can we create relationships among the ecosystem and the ecosystem in full that inhabits this architecture, and not only humans. Or, for example, also little social testaments. In this case, we introduce a kitchen that we design. It's also a kitchen design that can be used in other places that has that is movable. We can move the pieces of the kitchen anywhere, outside in the terrace to cook outside or to cook inside or to tuck them in a closet and disappear the kitchen in one moment. And I mean, kind of trying also to bring really forward ideas of eliminating barriers for discrimination or for exploitation in our built environment, which are totally embedded in the things we do, and we don't think about them. I mean, I designed this kitchen, and now I declare myself guilty for promoting this idea in an environment that really does not help at all. And we thought at some point as society that these open kitchens open the possibility of every person in the family or in the household to cook and to help with the activities, to only allow a show to be performed to them. But not only that, I mean, when you open a kitchen to the living spaces, you are eliminating the possibility of really creating food. In our case, in Mexico, food is really savory, and food has embedded in it culture, history, stories, love, care, many, many things. And those get really directed and very in your body through flavor, through color. If you cook a mole in this kitchen, I don't think anybody would dare to do it because, first of all, you will smell the mole for the next 3 years. Even if you use Clorox or something like that, you will truly smell it. But also, I mean, when you are cooking it, it will spill everything and it will create stains everywhere. You will not dare to do it. So we are killing, I mean, to start, these stoves will not serve for our food. Tortillas cannot be really heated in these stoves. Nevertheless, I never thought that I was killing my own culture by repeating just a module that comes in AutoCAD in every kitchen I designed. But now I clearly understand what those things really mean. I mean, we really think a stove is innocent. It's not innocent at all. This stove serves the industry, but it doesn't serve the cultures, the people, and the foods that exist out there. The same as the room, no? I mean, I never question that in the house and even embedded in the code, in the construction code in Mexico, to make a house called a house, there needs to be a double room to be inhabited by 2 people. I mean, who said that? When I started living together with my husband, I said, who told me that I needed to sleep with this guy that snores the whole night? Really, I mean, why? And why did someone decided that beds are for everybody? We might think are for everybody. I do like to sleep in a bed. I don't think I can sleep anything but in a bed. But in the Mayan culture, nobody sleeps in a bed. They sleep in hammocks. And you know why? It's 35 degrees with a humidity 35 centigrade. Sorry, I don't know Fahrenheit. The world is in centigrades. But I mean, it's very hot. It's very hot and extremely humid. And when you are in that condition, if you have a bed like this, you need air conditioning. And if you need air conditioning, you need a very large infrastructure for it. And if you need a very large infrastructure for it, then you need really a really robust system, capital system that holds into it. So really it's a circle of, and of course it's hyper damageful for the environment. So, but if you sleep in a hammock, you really swing yourself during the whole night. Also, not only cooling very well, allowing yourself to not get bitten by horrible insects that are really around there. When you have a bed like this, the insects, the scorpions and the spiders really go inside your bed, and then you need a more robust healthcare system to be able to serve those things that you could just avoid by allowing the people, because it's allowing, even the code would not allow in a certain way, to have and sleep however they've been sleeping for 500 years. I mean, this is not so millenary because the hammock was adopted by the Mayans after the Spanish came, but it was a pretty good addition to their life because that really helped with the environment that they're living in. I never question why today, if we ask anybody from children that barely speaks to anyone of any age, anywhere in the world to draw their house or their idea of a house, the drawing would be very similar. I think that's really outrageous. How did we become the tools to promote one single way of living? Who decided that that was the way of living? And I think that I understood profoundly that when I worked for the reconstruction of the earthquake in 2017. There was a very big earthquake in Mexico, 19th of September of 2017, that destroyed 500,000 homes in 3 different states in Mexico. It was really damageful, and one of the reasons was that the houses were barely poorly built, because after the NAFTA agreement was signed, all these new industrialized materials were poured into very remote areas that had no idea on how to use these materials, but nevertheless, those materials came with the label of progress and modernity, and you have to build with this because then you will not be poor. So instead of using their old ancient techniques of building, they started building with materials that they didn't know how to handle. So the houses went down. Thankfully, it was in very rural areas, so very few casualties were happening, only actually in one larger city. And so we got engaged with a town called San Simón el Alto to help rebuild almost 1,000 homes. But we decided to come in as only part of the people who understood how to rebuild. We knew that they knew better than anyone how to live. So we had really no intentions in designing their houses. We knew that we were the ones who knew how to use these industrialized materials, but that we didn't know how to use the local materials that were, for us, the most interesting to work with. We couldn't, but that's another story of another hour of lecture. And we really, much more than being able to provide any advice, we did some. We only knew how to put bricks, cinder blocks together with steel and concrete, so we helped with that. But they really taught us many, many, many things. Cooking is a collective act. It's never a solitary task for anyone. I mean, it's a community task, and it's very regarded. Those who cook are those who get or paid very well, or who are kind of the bosses of the communities. We also understood that there is not one single way of cooking, as I said. There are many, and that for the most important nutrients in this community, the stoves that we think are the only ones that should be there because are the safest one and the cleanest one, will not serve a thing. The things in which people cook are very varied and very different. We then understood that it's very difficult to think then on a model for a house. I already said it before. I don't think it's really a good idea to think that we can produce houses for anybody else to live. I don't think not only it's not a good idea, I don't think we have a right to decide how anybody else lives. Nevertheless, this is what we do, and this is the profession where we decided to go in. So what to do with it, I decided to think on how to transform the notions of the understanding of what is housing, what is a system that it's provided from the from the system towards the people, because in Mexico, housing is a constitutional right, so every government has the mandate to produce housing because every single citizen has a right to enjoy dignified and enjoyable place to live. That's what the Constitution, Article 4, says in Mexico. So I was thinking, if we are challenging then the idea of kind of producing an object by replacing it to understand that a house is a process and that a house holds a life that it's completely different to the other, but also it is changing, an ever-changing process from day 1 to day 100. So how can a house provide that? So we designed modules, 3 different modules that can be arranged in many different ways, that can be used in many different forms, that really also not only can hold different types of families in terms of social arrangements, in terms of gender, ages, etc. It also holds many different moments of life in progress. I also tend to think, we have a built environment embedded in codes in many countries of domestic spaces that serve a very specific type of family. So a family that is an heteropatriarchal family with 2 children that will never grow, because we design for those 2 parents with young children, and that's it. When they are not there, who knows where they live? When they are grown-ups, who knows how they live, no? So it's really, if we think that we have this built environment, design like that, that only serves kind of 15 years of the life of someone that does decide to go into this social configuration, which it only represents 19% of the world, then, we can think how obvious for me then, when I understood that, for me it was obvious that we needed to start thinking outside those possibilities. And then we think that these modules can perform very differently in a community, and that could really allow to understand how a community can really be reinforced. Nevertheless, this model was only built for a laboratory called APAN, that the Infonavit, which is the bank that holds the savings for all the workers to give them for housing, did build and commission 32 architects. And our house was put there as one of those other 31 that were just built as objects, as a limited built object, and we did not do that. So it's kind of very difficult to understand how our house could be tested in a laboratory like this, that when its capacities are very different. And this is also, when we saw this, we created, we understood why sometimes I think I don't do architecture, because I don't work to create objects in landscapes. I don't create forms and proportions and materials and geometries to box people. I really think that we hold bodies to exist. We think on stories. We think on the histories that came before. We think on changes. We think on progressions. We think on experiences, and then we use all those strategies of form and proportion and color and material to hold those things that we describe. So we not only challenge the ways we do architecture. The results obviously are very, very different. This is another strategy that could be implemented, but we also challenge the forms on how to represent that. This house, we were asked for a house in Spain in 2016, and this is in the border from Catalonia and Aragon, a place called Teruel, and they told us that there was not that they didn't knew who was going to inhabit this. And at the beginning, I was very, very skeptical about it, because I always thought that to do architecture, I not only have to work for the other or thinking on the other or talking to the other, had to become the other to do architecture. So I kind of obviously teased my mind to think that I was becoming the other to design a house, which is never true. And in this case, then I said, well, truly that's what we're doing, designing a house for other one that will inhabit it, that we don't know who it is. We will never know, even if we know them, even if we sit with them and we talk to them, we will never completely understand. So what is then a house that becomes a platform for anyone else to inhabit it their own way? And that has been a question ever since. And what we did here is we said, okay, we can really eliminate every determination that we give to a space, but the aesthetic one, because that's the only thing that you need to make aesthetics decisions to create a structure. So we did that in this case, and we thought that was our experiment for this one. So we started with a module that took different aesthetic definition and then multiplied, and then we spread it in the landscape. And then we were needed to submit plans for the municipality, and this is when problems started, because we decided, as I said, we were also thinking on the modes of representation. So in this case, we decided that these were going to be modules to be built in the landscape, but that anyone could decide how to use them. Is this a single house? Is one structure a single house? Is three structures the house, the rest are landscape structures? Is it that a person inhabits on each of them? We don't know, and we didn't want it to decide how. So when we needed to submit plans, this is when we started really thinking on the ways how also architectural representation determines who can, who cannot, and how can and how cannot anyone can inhabit the built environment. So we decided to do plans and sections and models at the same time, and elevations. These are little drawings in a butter paper that fold. It's hard to see in this image, but that they are really trying to tell you, you don't know what this space is about, and that is the whole idea. Use it as you want. But then they said, okay, fine. They accepted our plans this way, but they said, now we need images. Well, again, same story. So how can we create images that really will allow anyone to use a space as they want and not as we decide? So we couldn't figure it out. We had very little time. So what we did here is we did this. We asked Gonzalo, a person from our office, okay, Gonzalo, this is your house. How will you inhabit it? So we submitted the plans to the plans and the images to the municipality, saying this is the house of Gonzalo. And they're like, what? Who's Gonzalo? Yeah, don't worry. This image is the house from Gonzalo. The one who comes here might inhabit it differently. So but the start of understanding that also by the image we're determining how someone lives in the built environment is something that we really started deeply questioning after that project. Then in parallel, almost at the same time, they invited us to design a house in Germany, and the brief called for 20 architects to design a model of a house that could serve the new ways of living. And it struck me, the definition of the new ways of living, because it said that now the people were coming to live and work in the same space, and that we should start to think on those houses. And I was like, well, first of all, the house is the most important place of work, because reproductive work is done in the house, so care labor is there, and that is the labor we need to exist. So house is the most important place of work. Secondly, if we talk only about productive work, we've been doing productive work in the same space where we do reproductive labor since the start of humanity, and that we still do it today in the majority of the rural areas. I mean, a farm is exactly that, but except on very small privileged spaces of the urban, more developed areas. So for me, it was not new ways of living, was ways of living and different ways of living for sure. So how can we create a house that holds different ways of living? The brief also called for 6 spaces, a room, a bathroom, a kitchen, a living room, and another room, and a working space. So what we decided is to do a house with 6 different spaces. How did we define these spaces? We did this matrix of activities and things that these spaces could promote. So we described the 6 spaces with these words, and then we decided to collage each of these 6 spaces. And this was the first time we used collage not only as a form of representation, but also as a process to design this house. It was already very difficult. I'm sorry that they're not the credits on each of these images. Believe me, I know them, but they're not in these ones. But what we encounter is that even among us, the team that was designing this house, we could not agree what was one image that would really describe even one of the words that was describing the room. And this is why we use collages, because a collage really is an image that can be interpreted by anyone in their own way. A collage includes your voice on it. A collage is also inclusive because it's never finished. It's an open-ended image that it always can be added or subtracted, and always everybody does in their minds this exercise. And we thought that by doing the process of using the collage in describing each of the spaces of this house, we could really promote a different way of doing what we were doing, which was designing this space. After we did these 6 collages, we thought, now what? And then how do we design a house from here? And so we did. We put them all together and we sketched them, and this was the sketch that came out. And then we had 3 days to deliver. And then we had to really do a house out of that. And we arrived to this that for me actually was a bit disappointing, because when we finally delivered this model, it was, I thought we could have arrived to the same idea with doing a house with the same kind of design processes that we have learned since ever, and also with the same program that the brief described, and that we had not done anything different. Nevertheless, I was happy with the process. The process of doing these collages really gave us a lot in the office, but I thought the result was kind of disappointing. But one day, a year after, I received a call from Christoph Hesse, who was the architect who really made the brief and called for the others, that there was a couple that wanted to build our house because it really fitted perfectly their way of living. And I was like, oh, really, how? Because we didn't say what was there. There's not a kitchen, there's not a bathroom. And they're like, yeah, no, but why don't you go into a call with them? So we get into a call with them, and they describe how they would use this house in exactly the opposite way that I thought I was going to inhabit this place, that I thought we did something well, no? So they decided to put the kitchen where I thought I was going to put my room, in the most kind of tucked-in private space. That was for them the kitchen, and it really reinforced to me the idea that we all definitely, deep ways, we live very differently. And regardless of being from different cultures, even the same culture, my sister and I really have completely different ways of thinking on space in many regards, no? And kind of these ideas we are trying to embed and experiment. I don't like to say the word experiment because it's not an experiment. No, it's really a strong proposal to hold bodies to exist in a serious way. But it's that we are trying to implement ideas. We were called in 2017 to design a new block, an existing old residential, abandoned, non-used block in St. Louis, Missouri, into kind of growing into, again, a single residential, 22 single homes house block neighborhood. And how can we really design something different that would provoke an idea of a city that becomes a different thing. So what we did is we were at the same time working in the monastery. Now you recognize a little bit this diagram, understanding how to really integrate this notion of the intimate space, the private shared but shared with very intimate company people, the more common space or the more collective space. So we created a composition of a block that instead of single houses facing the street, are houses that are sharing different types of spaces that are kind of as an onion being layered of levels of exposure and scale from the inner space to the exterior of the neighborhood. And I mean, there are spaces that are shared by the whole community, which is, for example, these pools, or by the neighbors at large, like the dog park, that it's open to anybody, or the more collective, the smaller collective but exterior spaces, or the intimate exterior spaces, or the spaces shared by different organisms, living organisms, or the productive garden, or the playground. I mean, they're very different spaces, but I think that one of the core elements here is to think, how we can produce a different type of city. What is a different neighborhood, and what is really promoting a total different understanding. I mean, I think we also tend to think that architects, we have no power in creating a city. Nevertheless, every single piece that the city is made of is producing the city. So if we understand that the way we put a bench, the way we open a door from a private space to a public space is the way we are promoting or disfranchising the city and the engagement, we are producing the city. So we're producing the city even though we're designing a bed or designing a window in that bedroom. So how is the city that we are, what is the city that we are producing? We think of it even if we have to design a bench, a sidewalk, a lamp. And these things are really producing the type of environment that we have, and also the footprint that we are creating. So in this case, our house is very kind of attached to the thought of the whole master plan, and the idea is to have the most private space, that it's turned around to create even more privacy on the top, and then the open kind of first ground floor completely exposed to the collective spaces. The interior of the second space, of the second floor, really, kind of starts to be that, the center of the onion that then opens towards the exterior, and then it's open completely to the common spaces. And that the interweaving of those houses, those different houses, are really kind of sustaining and promoting that possibility. We designed one of the houses, or we designed the master plan, one of the houses, and the other three were designed one by Macias Peredo, who Maggie has been lecturing here with you. One was designed by Productora, who will be lecturing in a month. And the one with the two chimneys was designed by Moss from New York. So these four models of houses are going to be built in full in this block. 18 of them have been built, 16 have been inhabited, and it's in the process of getting finished. So that is kind of how we are embedding the ideas in larger kind of gestures. I'm going to go very quickly into then how this becomes even larger. We were asked to do a building of 150 units, and their premise of the people behind this building were like, now we hired Tatiana because she knows how to do community spaces. And then they give us the brief, 150 units with I don't know how much of amenity spaces. And we said, no, amenities, they're amenities, they're not community spaces. So erase, and let's do a building that erases the hierarchies, erases the one way of circulation, the idea of sucking people into a tube and then directing them to very efficiently to their private spaces so they can avoid any person in the building. We did the contrary, So, we try to promote conflicts in between neighbors. That's what a community is made of. We try to really kind of interweave spaces that could really not only provoke conflicts, but also provide different possibilities for people to engage with, and also trying to think what is an interior space that really is able to grow with them. This building is under construction, is in Monterrey, that is the neighbors that it has, so it's really a very different type of living. Let's see how this works, but so far it's very popular, and I'll tell you when it's done. I'm gonna skip the two other housing projects that I had and the Exhibit Columbus one, because I wanna get to the end of this, and I said in the beginning I like much more the dialogues and not the monologues, and this is looking like I'm going to end up with a monologue because there's no time for questions. But what I wanted to end with is also that the same way we are thinking and being very critical on the ways we produce the domestic space is the same way in we think to integrate the collective environment. And we are also thinking, that in order to hold us to live, we also need to understand ourselves how to hold a whole environment, a whole ecosystem, Architecture is something that is built on nature and that holds nature. This means many, many things. But this basic thing, I think we always forget, So one of the things is that nature is an ever-changing process. The ground changes every single second. The environment around, all the life that is around, including us, changes every single second. And the architecture is there, static, to hold us to exist there and to be imposed there in this environment in order to sustain us. So how to think this in circle is something that we have kind of encircled from the core and how we live inside and how it calls our intimate body onto how it relates to the environment. We worked in several projects around the Gulf of California, which is not for sale, let's say. But more importantly, it's called the Sea of Cortez. I mean, in Google it says Gulf of California, but the Sea of Cortez, which is one of the most incredibly biodiverse areas of the world, is kind of the center in which many projects that we're building. We started 20 years ago to work in the botanical garden in Culiacan, and this garden existed when we arrived, and our task was to understand how to intervene in this existing, ever-changing, beautiful ground to really provide small pieces of infrastructure for the new program to coexist here. The new program was an art program for big commissions of art like this one. This is Valesca Suarez or James Turrell, into also integrating possibilities for new programs and existing programs of the garden. So we created buildings and little pavilions that will hold them. This is the entrance of the building. So we created these umbrellas and these buildings to hold offices and ticket areas and store and these things. But we also tried to understand how to integrate the possibility of architecture to be a platform for exposing the systems of the garden. So, for example, the irrigation system, which is a very natural condition which works with the topography, then really is, it's exposed here, opened by the architecture to people and understand how the irrigation works. What we did with the buildings, I mean, I've been working for this garden for 20 years, so I'm not going to be able to tell it in a minute, but I think that the most kind of basic idea here was to understand how to create buildings that will be imposed in this environment, that will really create a whole here, but that they really will create also a possibility of a conversation, of holding the possibility of bodies to have different activities that could not otherwise be held in the exterior, but also by letting you know that you are in this wonderful botanical garden. So we've created different types of structures. They all kind of hold one principle, that there's one material in each of them. This is this is cinder block, but then the other one is concrete. That holds everything together. No, it's the aesthetic final definition, but it's the structure, but it's the insulation definition. Everything is embedded in one single material. And because of that commission, I'm also going to skip this project, I'm very sorry. Because of that commission, we were asked to think of a park in Mazatlan. So Culiacan is north of Mazatlan. They are both in the Pacific shore, well, the door to the Sea of Cortez, but on the side of the country. And Mazatlan is now a service city, used to be a very kind of luxury resort space, but became a service city, and that had a central park that was never used because it had a very specific condition of a naturally regulating lagoon. This lagoon changes its level, and therefore for every government it was very difficult to understand how to consolidate a public social space within these kind of physical conditions. So we started working, obviously, with the whole environment, the hydrological system of the city, to understand how to consolidate a space that is used in many ways, but basically that has three very specific conditions. One that is flooded all the time, one that is flooded sometimes and that is dried sometimes, and one that is dried always. And it allows to create spaces that really people engage with according to the season of the years in many different ways. In other parts of the world, more northern latitudes like this one, public space is used in many different ways during the year because of very clear changing conditions. In Mazatlan, it's not that, so people do not understand the cycle. So for us, this was a really opportunity to engage the social understanding of the cycle of the year. Because of the ever-changing level of the lagoon. When we started working on physical land, the first thing we had to do is to really restore the environment of the lagoon and clean it all, because all these buildings in front will discharging the sewage to that lagoon. So the city had to build a completely new infrastructure, and then we cleaned the lagoon, and then we started intervening, doing the park. We knew that two very big pieces of infrastructure were coming to the park. We knew that they had already been assigned to different architects. It was an aquarium and a museum, and so we continued to work on the park. And when we were doing this, the response was so positive, and the understanding of the whole environment as a whole was so striking for the people who we were working with. I don't know why, because I mean that's naturally what you had to do, but they were really struck, and they said, you know, Tatiana, can you better design us the aquarium, because what we have, we now understand that it's not an aquarium. It doesn't look like an aquarium. And I'm like, well, I have a real problem with that, and I don't know. The first thing is that I don't believe in aquariums, because for me they are these buildings that are exactly what this mural is trying to depict from. This mural is called Mind Controller of the Universe. It was painted in Rockefeller Center by Diego Rivera in 1933, but later erased by the Rockefeller family, and then he repainted it in the Palace of Fine Arts in Mexico City in 1934. And it's called the Man Controller of the Universe. And I think the aquariums are exactly that in general. They promote the possibility of people to see, otherwise we cannot see life. But instead they're kind of patronizing that life in order to fantasize with it and make a business out of it. So what for me was really an impossibility to do. And then I told them, well, you have the most important natural aquarium 100 meters from where you want to build an aquarium. Why would you want to build penguins if you have the Sea of Cortez there? And they said, well, exactly that's the thing. We don't think that this aquarium is looking like an aquarium, the design what we have. And we want you to think of an identitarian piece that connects our society with our close environment, which is the Sea of Cortez. And then they said, we're talking about a different thing. Nevertheless, it's called an aquarium. I also think it's not an aquarium, the same way I think I don't do architecture. So we then thought, well, it's impossible for us to imagine how to create a building that becomes that really becomes the link between society, the social space, and the environment. because the architecture is limiting always that, and it's tending to limit it more. So what we did is we thought of a narrative to design this building that we arrived in the year 2289 to a building that was flooded in the year 2100. It was built in the year 2020. We don't know why it was built or what it was built for. We only knew that in the year 2100 it was flooded, the water receded because I think it's cyclical, and then we were able to see the life that took over the building as their habitat, and that created a really interesting ecosystem. So what we did is we produced these two big stairs that bring you to the roof of that building, where a very important part of the ecosystem had been planted, to bring you into the center and discovering what happened inside. And this is truly the narrative in which we designed the building, a building that is taken over by nature, that is promoting the possibility of becoming a habitat for many, many species. And this is how we started building this building in the year 2020. We finished in 2023. And since then, it has started to be inhabited by many different types of species. 1.5 million of us have visited the building so far, but we hope that by the very near future, at least 1.5 million different species can inhabit in this place, which is promoting that possibility of many different forms of life to be sustained. I don't know about you, but I'll be there in the year 2289, and if I don't swim as a fish on the building, I certainly will be very happy to see whoever comes with me. And I think that with that, very late, giving some very few minutes to talk, I will open for questions. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Maybe it was too clear or not clear at all. Well, I just wanted to say, there's a question here, I finished this, that I said in the beginning, I think architecture is a collective art. Certainly, this is a collective since the beginning. You heard me talking about we and we and we. We are not only 6 partners, we're a team of thousands of people that without any of them living and not living, and that have been there and will be there, this could not exist. Thank you. There was a question here.
You've talked about the importance of, the individual and especially in the collective. And I'm curious, when you look broadly at, maybe the US because we're here, what would you if you guys could only get in your minds X, that would just help to change everything to design for the collective?
I mean, I think that is exactly what we do, because you cannot do everything in one building, no? Yeah. So we always choose what is one thing that in this case we can build. What is the one value that we're going to hold that will overcome with everything, no? Because obviously you cannot break everything in once. I mean, I always tend to think that to be an anarchist, you have to be part of the system, right? Because if not, you are just, it's not going to produce anything. So in order to really, for me to engage in the production of change, I need to give up into the system. So what are those things that you're giving up? In every project is different. But there's limits, I have to say, okay? So we don't go everywhere. And we have really a set of values that are written in a manual where we won't go, no? So if a building will take kind of any project takes those values into those umbrella values for something, we would not go in. If we are able to use those platforms, because you have to provoke something, then we will use them. No, I mean, the aquarium is a perfect example. It is a center of research. It is an identitarian piece that it's creating otherwise, but it is also a place that has tanks and that has fishes flying, swimming around. Some are flying. Some things are flying in this building, of course. But in order to be able to provoke a different mentality in how you use a space like this, or what do you use for, or why do you bring fishes into these tanks, it's necessary to do them, no? So, and to create this reflection is necessary to kind of hold on to those things. So, yeah, that's how we choose our battles, let's say, and it's certainly something that you cannot do it all, no? And what is the most important thing that you can hold? And that's what we hold, and each building has one different.